Their company received millions of dollars. They didn't receive $2.6 million?
They did. The company.
The company.
Not them personally.
No, but they were part of the company.
Not them personally.
But you don't see
Not them personally.
State Ethics Commission says there is sufficient evidence to conduct a probe of Tampa State Representative Jamie Grant.
In addition to opening an investigation on Grant, the Ethics Commission also is investigating several Hardee County officials who approved the deal.
Your facts are off there, Mike. You need to check your facts.
And then there's the status of his business partner, Orlando State Rep Jason Broder, who avoided commenting to the 10 News investigators for weeks. What are you trying to hide that you won't talk to us?
Well, I'm not trying to hide anything.
This is a big deal because the Ethics Commission outright rejects more than 2/3 of the complaints it receives each year.
I don't apologize to my salary to anybody, and I'm through with it.
But what about the $155,000 cap? Dr. Harvey, you're the chairman of the board. The board itself has spent almost $100,000 in taxpayer money going to San Francisco, to Boston, to New Orleans. Is that appropriate when the Housing Authority...
I don't have a comment. Thank you.
And so the taxpayers don't have a right to know about this?
They can come to this office anytime they want to.
You're really being obnoxious. I don't know why your station allows you to continue to put out this junk.
Mr. Secretary, as you are aware, we've done a series of stories questioning some of the expenditures of the Tampa Housing Authority. Can you tell me what HUD's position is on that?
All I can say is that we are looking at investigating it, and as a result, I don't have any comment on it today.
Your story alerted me to it, and when you have all this amount of money that's spent on going to conferences, I think some $860,000 is what I've heard. Every dollar that goes to airfare, meals, lodging, conference fees is another dollar that can't be used to help house homeless Tampa Bay residents.
Finding a job is tough right now for thousands of Floridians. So when word of a new company coming to a small Bay Area town spread, people had high hopes.
Rural Hardee County gave this company millions of dollars, but as 10 News investigator Mike Deeson discovered, a group of powerful politicians without any company and without any product already had their own plans for that money.
Welcome to Hardee County. It's about an hour east of Sarasota, and this rural county is worlds away from the life most of us know. Not only is Hardee one of the smallest counties in the state, it's also one of the poorest, with nearly 29% of the people living below the poverty level. So, how long have you been looking for a job?
About a year and a half.
Tell me.
And just nothing out there. There's just nothing here.
This woman, we will call Teresa, is so embarrassed about being out of work, she asked us not to show her face. In the time she's been out of work, she's gone to the Hardee County Workforce Office twice a week, hoping to find anyone who will hire a 55-year-old woman.
I don't know what the future holds for me, but, you know, I just keep plugging along one day at a time.
Does it scare you?
Yeah, sure it does. You know, that's a lot of days I feel like I'm one step away from being under the bridge.
Teresa might have been able to cash in on a $2.6 million economic development grant that the county was handing out, but it wasn't in the cards for her because some powerful people already had their own plan for the money.
I'm not interested in giving an interview.
Meet Tampa State Representative Jamie Grant. His company, LifeSync Technologies, pitched a bold plan to county officials. Give the company $2.6 million, and LifeSync would create a cloud-based medical records firm and bring jobs to Hardee County. Public records indicate Grant had powerful allies and partners, including State Representative Jason Broder from Orlando, State Representative Ben Albritton of Hardee County, and his brother, Hardee County Insurance Agency owner Joe Albritton.
Your facts are off there, Mike. You need to check your facts.
Well, Joe Albritton wasn't involved in
Joe Albritton has no equity in my company, has never had any equity in my company.
But we did check the facts. And look what we found in the minutes from the Hardee County agency that handed out the money. Joe Albritton, who was on the board that gave Grant the money, abstains from voting on an issue involving Grant's company because he's a part owner. In addition, Joe Albritton abstained at another meeting, and his disclosure form says both he and his brother, Representative Ben Albritton, could receive special gain from LifeSync.
The allegation that anybody that was involved in the grant process received equity that was related to a legislator, or that a legislator gave equity to is just completely offensive.
But critics of the LifeSync deal suggest what is offensive is that it appears the deck was stacked because the head of the county agency that issued the grant is this man, Jim C. C just happens to be the uncle of the Albritton brothers and shares office space with Joe Albritton. Their company received millions of dollars. They didn't receive $2.6 million?
They did. The company.
The company.
Not them personally.
No, but they were part of the company.
Not them personally.
But you don't see
Not them personally.
But they were part of that entity.
Not them personally.
But it doesn't stop there. Meet Sue Burge, the chair on the board. Burge's son was also hired by the company. You don't think it opens you up to someone saying it creates an appearance of impropriety?
I can't help what people's opinions are. I just know that he was qualified for the job.
And Jim C., who approved the grant money, says the same thing about his son, who was also hired by the company.
Or I threw in my 2 cents and said, you need to hire my son or we're not going to give you any money. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I don't, just from appearance.
That's your insinuation.
Well, the insinuation is that it might look
That's your insinuation.
But it might look funny that your son and the chairman's son.
And when I've told the other people the truth, they don't want to hear the truth.
But the truth that the legislators involved in the company in Hardee County don't want anyone to hear about is this scathing report from the Auditor General, which said the $2.6 million should never have been given to the lawmakers' company, LifeSync. It cites several reasons. 1, the company wasn't legally qualified to get the money. 2, the company didn't offer proof it was capable of making it all happen. 3, there wasn't a plan in place to see how LifeSync was using the money. And finally, the Auditor General contends the $2.6 million didn't bring any economic benefit to Hardee County. What about the Auditor General? Was the Auditor General totally off base?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And while the Auditor General's office here in Tallahassee is charged with looking into improprieties like it found in Hardee County, Grant contends that the Auditor General and this audit are completely wrong. And everything he and Hardee County did was completely right.
It's discouraging, it's disheartening, and it's despicable.
And what muddies the picture even more is that the politicians who got the $2.6 million violated their agreement with Hardee County and sold their interest in the grant money and the product they never developed. In return, they got more than 1 million shares of stock from the new company. Meantime, since the Auditor General visited Hardee County, the $2.6 million has created a total of 10 jobs. And 3 have gone to relatives of those involved in handing out the money. Stay tuned. More to come.
And welcome back. Our Mike Deeson has been a busy man. A 10 News investigation getting action tonight. The investigators, Deeson, of course, broke the story about 3 state legislators who got millions to bring jobs to a local county. But today, Reggie, very little to show for it.
A story aired on Monday, and now that state ethics investigators are involved in the case. All while the man at the center of the deal tries to spin the story. But Mike Deeson and the 10 News investigators, they've got the real deal.
It's discouraging, it's disheartening, and it's despicable.
This Hardee County woman, we'll call her Teresa, is fed up. She's been out of work more than a year and a half. That's why Teresa was so upset to learn that Tampa State Representative Jamie Grant engineered a deal that public records indicate involved 2 other state reps and several powerful people to get $2.6 million taxpayer dollars to create jobs in Hardee County. But as we reported Monday, this scathing Auditor General's report blasted the deal that gave the money to the legislators' company, LifeSync. LifeSync brought 10 jobs to the county, but several of them went to relatives of people connected to the deal.
We looked for good things that happened, but we were unable to find any. At the end of our field work, it's our belief that this had created no employment in the county.
The Auditor General also said that the politicians never should have received the money because they applied for it without having a company or product. After our report aired, Representative Grant complained bitterly to the Miami Herald and Tampa Bay Times about our investigation, saying that we misrepresented things in a way I've never seen. But let's look at the facts. But what about the Auditor General? I'm not speaking to me. The Auditor General said that you should have never gotten the grant, not you particularly, the way it was given out. That shouldn't have been given out.
Mike, I think your understanding is off, and I think that process is still running its course.
Grant is wrong. The Auditor General's report is not a preliminary, but a final audit. And that's not all Grant is wrong about. He told the newspapers, at the end of the day, it wasn't a taxpayer grant, it's private money. Not true. Page 3 of the audit talks about the grant and says the Board of County Commissioners may expend public funds, and talks about the grant being public funds several times throughout the report. And then there's the status of his business partner, Orlando State Rep Jason Broder, who avoided commenting to the 10 News investigators for weeks. What are you trying to hide that you won't talk to us?
Well, I'm not trying to hide anything.
While Broder says he isn't trying to hide anything, Grant seems to be hiding Broder's involvement in the company. Grant told the newspapers Broder is a consultant for LifeSync, but state records list the politician as a director of the company. Finally, Grant complained to the papers, "We never violated the agreement with the county," telling us,
"There is nothing that we have ever done that has not been fully transparent."
Not true again. Page 7 of the Auditor General report says, contrary to the provisions of the grant agreement, the company did not obtain prior written approval to assign the grant agreement and, in effect, sell the deal to another company. The bottom line? A lot of money was handed out to Grant and his colleagues to help bring jobs to Hardee County, but to people like Teresa, it wasn't worth it.
Sure, I'll clean toilets, clean out dog cages, whatever. You know, it doesn't matter to me. I want to work.
But you can't find the job.
No.
As we reported, ethics complaints have been filed, and state investigators will now look into the allegations regarding these public officials. But the legislators may have more cause for concern. We also asked Florida Speaker of the House Will Weatherford, who's pushing ethics reform, to take a look at our report. And of course, the 10 News investigators will stay on top of this to see what he plans to do about it.
Mike, thank you so much. Now, we contacted Representative Jamie Grant today, and this evening he sent a response saying in part that he believes we are actively collaborating with people intentionally working against economic development in Hardee County. Now, Grant says he believes we are more interested in creating news than reporting it. And as so long as that is the case and until informed otherwise, we should assume that both Grant and his company are consulting with lawyers and exploring every potential recourse. We have posted Grant's complete response on our webpage at WTSP.com.
Well, when you elect someone to represent you, their salary is paid by your tax dollars. But what if some of those local leaders took that paycheck plus turned around and used their position to take millions more of your taxpayer dollars to fund their own business deals?
Well, the 10 News investigators found that it happened right here in one Bay Area county, and the investigator, Mike Deeson, who first broke this story, has found the smoking gun that proves it.
So I'm proud of the work that's been done.
But Tampa State Representative Jamie Grant is talking about a multi-million-dollar taxpayer grant he received from Hardee County. But some who live in Hardee, like retired Air Force pilot Hank Kuhlman, say Grant should be ashamed.
There are specific Florida statutes that prohibit using your position as an elected official to your special private gain. You can't do that.
But the 10 News investigators have found evidence that appears to show Grant and another state rep, Jason Broder, got $2.6 million in taxpayer money because they're elected officials. Listen to a conversation before a Hardee County Industrial Development Authority, or IDA, meeting as the number 2 person in the agency explains why it's important that the IDA give the millions to Grant's company.
Not to mention Jamie, the one on the right. The first one.
Yes.
To the computer. He's a state representative.
Really? Oh, that helps.
And then there's another partner who is not here today, who is also a state representative.
Gotcha. I can always help.
The staffer, Sarah Pelham, explains it's good for the county to give big bucks to friendly legislators.
So it's not only beneficial for, them to get help from us, it's beneficial for us to help them. Yes.
Could be cool. When we tried to ask Bill Lambert, the head of the agency that gave the grant, he said it would take 3 days to explain and wasn't happy when I recorded his reply with my iPhone. I don't have 3 days to spend with you. It's fine. But I do want to ask you a couple of questions. Give me my phone. Give me my phone. Give me my phone and I'll call the police that you actually... Don't you touch my phone. And that's why Grant is now the target of this ethics complaint filed by Kuhlman, who points out that Grant sold his company without telling Hardee County as he was supposed to in return for more than 1 million shares of stock of the new company, as well as a consulting agreement that paid him several $1,000s. And state records now show that Grant was able to increase his net worth from a little more than $1,000 to more than $100,000 in less than 2 years.
The people of Hardee County are figuring it out.
Meantime, Grant says, this complaint has no merit and I am confident it'll be dismissed. He says it's nothing more than an attempt to tarnish my reputation at the urging of special interests. The claims made are patently false, and he says I look forward to them being proven as such.
There is nothing that we have ever done that has not been fully transparent.
According to the Auditor General, that's not exactly true. And the worst part, the taxpayer grant was supposed to help people in Hardee County, one of the state's poorest counties, get jobs. But so far, only a handful of people have been hired, and many of them are family members of local leaders. And that includes the husband of Sarah Pelham, who we heard saying on the tape it would be good for Hardee County to give the lawmakers the money. It was good for Sarah's family for sure. Now we'll have to see if the State Ethics Commission cracks down on Representative Grant and his colleagues.
The State Ethics Commission says there is sufficient evidence to conduct a probe of Tampa State Representative Jamie Grant. 10 News investigator Mike Deeson first broke that story that led to this action, and Mike brings us up to date.
Well, Reg, the State Ethics Commission sent out this letter launching a full investigation as a result of allegations that Grant and 2 other legislators received $2.6 million in public money from Hardee County, despite the fact, according to the Auditor General, they had no company and no product when they applied for the public money. Although Grant has maintained all along there was nothing wrong with the deal, the Auditor General found problems and said the way the money was given to Grant and his partners was not consistent with Florida statutes. Grant says, I look forward to providing the Ethics Commission with every corporate and financial document needed to establish these allegations as baseless so we can get back to furthering the success of this project without politically motivated distractions. In addition to opening an investigation on Grant, the Ethics Commission also is investigating several Hardee County officials who approved the deal. And this is a big deal because the Ethics Commission outright rejects more than 2/3 of the complaints it receives each year. We'll stay on top of it.
Thank you, Mike.
It was 2004 when Hurricane Charlie charged across Florida. You may remember that. Obviously, everybody does. After the storm, some local leaders saw opportunity filing big damage claims.
Yeah, but there's a big question. What happened to all that insurance money? And you might not like what we found. Here's 10 News investigator Mike Deeson with a story you will see only on 10.
It's disaster.
When Hurricane Charlie unleashed its fury on Florida in 2004, it left a trail of damage from businesses to homes.
We lost everything.
After the storm, cities and counties lined up with insurance claims, including Hardee County. Some county officials claimed the Hardee County Civic Center in Wauchula was one of its buildings that had taken a beating in the storm. But Hardee County Commissioner Grady Johnson doesn't buy it.
What kind of damage was here? It appears to me very little.
Johnson, a retired deputy sheriff, says the county filed a huge claim on the Civic Center to fix up the alleged storm damage. He wants to know where all that money went.
It appears to me that there's well over $1 million been paid out on this.
On this building?
On this building.
Look at a picture of the Civic Center the day after Charlie hit. It doesn't look much different from today. Even the water damage on the inside seems minimal, especially when you consider it has a terrazzo floor. But the bill for emergency drying was $576,000.
When I first seen that, it just took my breath away. $500,000 to pump water or remove water from a concrete building, which you have seen, terrazzo floors.
And it's not just the Civic Center. Johnson is also upset about the figures he's seen for the county-owned Rest Haven nursing home.
There's over $1 million was supposed to have been spent here, and the figures that I've seen after this hurricane.
Do you believe that?
No, sir. No, sir.
Wendell Cotton is on the board of directors of Rest Haven. He says the building on the outside and inside is 40 years old and looks it. And it doesn't look like hundreds of thousands were spent on the building just 9 years ago. When you hear that they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars out here, what do you think?
I think it's a joke. Where's this money at? What happened to it? Because it certainly didn't go in this building, and it did not go in that building over there.
9 years after Charlie, FEMA still has not closed the file. Back then, the agency discovered conflicts on damage description, scope of work, and cost estimates. So we wanted to get some answers. Doug Knight was the county point person for repairs. But people are asking questions about how the money was spent in Hurricane Charlie.
Pull the file.
Well, I have pulled the file.
Mike.
I have pulled the public records.
Mike, thank you. Have a good day.
Hey, you have a good one too, Doug. Knight refused to answer our questions, but County Manager Lex Albritton was Knight's boss after the storm. Albritton claims he's convinced the millions of dollars of repairs were all done.
Everything. It's all as documented as it can be documented. I can't make you believe it.
But through these scathing letters and emails obtained by the 10 News investigators, as well as comments at public meetings, then Hardee County Clerk of Court Hugh Bradley charged that Albritton and his hired gun, Doug Knight, lied about whether the people who did the repairs were actually approved to do it. Broke the law when they authorized the payout of insurance money without going through the clerk of court's office, and may have paid some vendors twice for the same work. The battle between the clerk, who is now retired, and County Manager Albritton over the way the money was spent came to a head at this county meeting 1 year ago.
People really, truly want integrity, and they want honesty, and they want to know that there are not a few in position that are trying to, for whatever reason, divert $1 million.
The belief that that money's going to some shell company that then divided it and turned it back to the employee myself is pure bull.
Well, it's true it's not accounted for in his accounting records. That doesn't mean it's not accounted for.
But Commissioner Johnson, the retired deputy, isn't satisfied. He wants the U.S. Attorney to open a federal investigation into where the money went. Money that could have helped people who really suffered from the storm.
The evidence is so overwhelming that there is something seriously wrong involving a lot of money.
Meantime, while Doug Knight, who led the insurance efforts for the county during Charlie, wouldn't answer our questions on camera, he did email me a statement that attacked former Clerk of Court Hugh Bradley. Knight says he doesn't believe Bradley has the competency to handle money appropriations for Charlie or grasp the claim loss and the documentation. Bradley, who is retired and traveling out of state, couldn't be reached, but it's worth noting that he spent 15 years as the chief financial officer of Hardee County, and he is the only one that state law says should be handling the money and the payouts, not the county manager nor his hired gun, Doug Knight. We'll stay on top of it. More to come.
And now to our 10 News special investigation. The Tampa Housing Authority recently upgraded their headquarters, and it cost $2 million more than the board was told it would.
Yeah, and while the Housing Authority is living sweet in their new building, 10 News investigator Mike Deeson shows you some struggling families are living in unfit conditions.
It's a tale of two buildings, paint peeling off the walls and ceiling, versus plush landscaping and fountains. In one, steamy apartments with no central air. In the other, plush conference rooms with fancy artwork. Cracks in the walls here. Fancy lounge areas with expensive company chairs there. These are two properties with the same owner, the Tampa Housing Authority. They're less than 5 miles away from one another, but worlds apart. And you paid for them both.
The plugs don't work, the refrigerators don't work. The paint in here gets my daughter sick.
This woman, we'll call her Lisa, was afraid to have her face on camera. She lives here in the North Boulevard Public Housing Project. Lisa's upset that the Housing Authority has moved into new headquarters while her family's home lies in disrepair. Others in public housing, like Tim, feel the same way.
Much more could be done for the residents than what's being done over there for that new Taj Mahal.
The Taj Mahal he's referring to is a former office building on Cypress Boulevard in the West Shore area. The Housing Authority bought the building in 2010 for $4.2 million, but the CEO said they would still need even more money for renovation.
I think the initial estimates before we actually got into the building was probably close to $1 million.
But Housing Authority Chief Financial Officer Andy Libby admits it didn't exactly work out that way.
If you add in all the other amenities that had to or didn't have to be put in, we're well over 2.5 million, approaching 3, correct?
Well, if you add in all of those soft costs.
But those soft costs add up. In the end, the whole building will cost in excess of $7 million hard dollars, your tax dollars. And that doesn't sit well with those in public housing.
I think a waste of money to purchase a brand new building and to continue to upgrade that building when so much more could be done right here in public housing.
But Libby says residents like Lisa and her North Boulevard neighbors should be patient because the authority plans to fix up her community in a few years.
It's going to be transformed. We're working as hard as we can to do that.
Do you have a date?
We would hope in the next couple of years we could move forward with that. Funding is a challenge.
But funding is less of a challenge for the man in charge of the Tampa Housing Authority. Housing Authority CEO Jerome Ryans earns $214,000 a year, even though federal regulations say a Housing Authority director cannot be paid more than $155,000 in federal funds.
But it's taxpayer dollars that he's getting paid with.
It is federal taxpayer dollars, yes.
And while every dollar of Ryan's salary starts out as federal HUD money, the Housing Authority has found an almost magical way to get around that $155,000 limit. Here's how it works. Every month, another agency in the Housing Authority, the North Tampa Development Housing Corporation, receives thousands of dollars from HUD. It waves a magic wand over that money and says, presto changeo, this is no longer federal money. And it pays Ryans an extra $59,000.
I don't apologize for my salary to anybody, and I'm through with it.
But what about the $155,000 cap that HUD says?
We're going to ask you to exit from the property, please. Thank you. We're going to ask you to leave.
This is a public.
I'm sorry, guys. This is a private parking area.
But the security chief was wrong. It was a public area. However, Ryans ran back inside rather than answer questions about his headquarters building or salary. But Lisa and those living in public housing want to know why the authority is focusing on new plush headquarters while they live in rundown buildings.
I want better, but right now, you know, times are hard. We are struggling, so if that's the case, then come and do something to these apartments. Spend the millions in these apartments for us to have something better.
The Housing Authority says the money for the new building comes from a different account than the money for the public housing units. But critics still say they don't understand the fancy digs. And in regards to Ryan's salary, get this. According to materials the Tampa Housing Authority provided us, getting around the $155,000 salary cap is not THA's idea alone. They say HUD even has guidelines for how agencies can defederalize money in order to pay salaries beyond the cap. You can count the 10 News investigators will stay on top of this.
News at 11.
Good evening, I'm Heather Van Ness.
And I'm Reginald Roundtree. Thank you for joining us. Money is tight at the Tampa Housing Authority. The agency says that they're having trouble making ends meet.
But the 10 News investigators found that the THA, whose mission is to help poor families put a roof over their heads, is not having any problems putting their own staff in fancy hotels all across the country. 10 News investigator Mike Deeson crunched the numbers and has a story you'll see only on 10.
The Tampa Housing Authority gets $79 million a year to provide for Tampa's most needy citizens, some who are living in less than desirable public housing. But the authority says it's struggling to do more with less.
We're still expected to do the same thing that we've been doing in public housing for the last 10 years with less money. We can't continue to maintain public housing as we see it today based on our funding levels.
While the THA is singing the blues over funding cuts, the agency still seems to have plenty of money for travel. From the streets of San Francisco to the French Quarter in New Orleans, from Nashville, the Music City, to the windy city of Chicago, New York, Savannah, Washington, D.C., Charleston, Boston. The investigators analyzed the agency records. In the past 3 years, the Tampa Housing Authority has spent more than $500,000 on travel and training and is budgeted to spend $234,000 this year alone. And despite budget cuts, the THA still increased next year's travel budget to $306,000. That's up more than 30%. The investigators also reviewed other agencies within the same 3-year time period. While the Tampa Housing Authority was spending almost $504,000, we discovered it was 64% more on travel and training than the Miami-Dade Housing Authority. Miami-Dade spent $307,000 in the same time period, while operating on a budget almost 5 times larger.
Things are changing.
Records reveal Tampa Housing CEO Jerome Ryans has spent more than $28,000 in the past 3 years traveling to conferences. And you've spent the past 3 years with more than several hundred. Well, I would like to know from you about the hundreds of thousands of dollars you allowed. We've seen this before. Ryans ran from us earlier this year when we questioned him about his salary.
I don't apologize for my salary to anybody, and I'm through with it.
We also wanted to ask Ryans why taxpayers picked up the bill for valet parking for him in Orlando, or Best of Boston tours for board members and staff, or why several staffers stayed at expensive hotels, in some cases for up to $400 a night. Dr. Harvey, you're the chairman of the board. The board itself has spent almost $100,000 in taxpayer money going to San Francisco, to Boston, to New Orleans. Is that appropriate when the Housing Authority...
I don't have a comment. Thank you.
And so the taxpayers don't have a right to know about this?
They can come to this office anytime they want to.
But the king of travel is the number 2 man in the agency, Leroy Moore. Moore has spent more than $60,000 of public money traveling to conferences in the past 3 years. Mr. Moore, which city did you enjoy the most on the taxpayers' dime? San Francisco, Boston, New Orleans, Chicago, New York?
Mike Deeson, you've received all of our reports for the last 5 years. It shows that this housing authority spent between $160,000 and $180,000 a year on travel and training. You're really being obnoxious. I don't know why your station allows you to continue to put out this junk, but it's really running thin.
But what is really running thin is the budget at the Tampa Housing Authority, which readily admits because of cuts, it may not be able to provide the same degree of services for its residents, some of whom live in these rundown, unair-conditioned apartments, while at the same time, some board and staff members booked rooms at golf and beach resorts so they could attend conferences on the taxpayer dime. You spent $60,000.
Do you want to continue to be obnoxious?
Will you answer the question?
I've answered your question.
But there are more questions to be answered. U.S. Senator Charles Grassley of Iowa says he is shocked by what he calls excessive travel by public housing authorities across the United States. Now the senator is calling for an investigation into the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which provides the majority of funding for the Tampa Housing Authority. And you can bet that the 10 News investigators will stay on top of this and let you know what happens.
I'm Reginald Roundtree.
And I'm Heather Van Est.
We begin tonight with a big development in an investigation that we have been following for some time. A senior U.S. senator is questioning some of the Tampa Housing Authority's spending for questionable expenses.
And this probe into HUD comes after a series of stories by 10 News investigator Mike Deeson. He joins us now with much more. Mike?
Well, Heather and Reg, Senator Charles Grassley wrote this scathing letter to the Secretary of HUD blasting the Tampa Housing Authority for numerous items we've uncovered, including $860,000 spent on travel and training since 2009, which Grassley says appears to have surpassed other housing authorities. And Grassley says it gives the impression of being an excuse to take expensive vacations paid with taxpayer dollars. And that resulted in staff and board members spending more than 500 workdays outside the office. The senator blasts the $214,000 salary of CEO Jerome Ryans, which exceeds the mandatory salary cap by almost $60,000. He questions the new $7 million administrative office, and he asks why the agency has spent $800,000 on salary and benefits for a public relations department, but has to hire a $170,000 PR consultant. And he's concerned about the $2.8 million in legal fees to an outside lawyer who is also married to a housing authority employee.
There's people with high salaries, people living high on the hog, people just having a merry time, when there's people that are homeless that could be living there. And your story alerted me to it. And when you have all this amount of money that's spent on going to conferences, I think some $860,000 is what I've heard. Every dollar that goes to airfare, meals, lodging, conference fees is another dollar that can't be used to help house homeless Tampa Bay residents.
Now, the Tampa Housing Authority, which refused to go on camera, issued a statement saying it's well managed, its travel is reasonable, the $7 million building was a necessity, and CEO Jerome Ryan's salary, they say, is reasonable and board approved. However, we found that the authority uses creative accounting to get around federal rules, and Senator Grassley agrees with us.
I'm sure you'll have much more. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, is opening a full-blown financial investigation into the Tampa Housing Authority.
Now, this investigation comes after a series of reports by the 10 News investigators. Today, our Mike Deeson talked to the Secretary of HUD, hoping to get more answers.
With 9,000 people on the waiting list, the Tampa Housing Authority is having a hard time finding space for some of Tampa's neediest families to go into unair-conditioned apartments. But the 10 News investigators crunched the numbers. We found the THA had plenty of money for some things, like buying and remodeling its new headquarters building at a cost of $7 million taxpayer dollars, paying the agency's CEO, Jerome Ryans, $214,000 a year in salary, and hundreds of thousands of dollars for travel by the board and staff. Today, we caught up with U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Sean Donovan. HUD provides most of the money for THA. Mr. Secretary, as you are aware, we've done a series of stories questioning some of the expenditures of the Tampa Housing Authority. Can you tell me what HUD's position is on that?
All I can say is that we are looking at investigating it, and as a result, I don't have any comment on it today.
Leroy Moore, the second in command at THA, has spent more on travel than anyone else. But today, Moore claimed to be delighted that HUD is investigating the agency's spending practices.
Mr. Moore, you told me my investigation had no merit. HUD is now doing a full financial investigation of the Tampa Housing Authority. What is your position now?
We welcome credible organizations to come in and look at our records because you're not credible. We absolutely applaud it.
You applaud it. So
we applaud the Secretary.
Okay. While HUD Secretary Sean Donovan couldn't address the investigation, HUD officials in D.C. told me this morning there will be a full-blown financial audit of the Housing Authority. In addition, the agency is in for more scrutiny because U.S. Senator Charles Grassley of Iowa is also calling for action. Grassley is concerned about money being wasted on THA travel, the building, and the fact that CEO Ryan's $214,000 salary is almost $60,000 above the HUD maximum. Reg?
The 10 News investigators exposed questionable spending at the Tampa Housing Authority, and now federal investigators are involved and they want answers. Federal Housing and Urban Development inspectors were in Tampa this week. They want to know why board members are spending money on pricey offices or expensive trips when some THA residents are living in shoddy conditions. 10 News investigator Mike Deeson talks to the people who are counting on the THA to help them and not themselves.
This is it, right?
Yeah, this is it. This is the living room. It's supposed to be the kitchen. Fortunately, the kitchen's so small I didn't put a kitchen table, but this is it.
Reva Iman calls this cramped Robles Park apartment home. The Robles complex is a Tampa Housing Authority project that's run down with boarded up apartments and no money for amenities.
So no air conditioning, no screens so you can open the windows. What's it like in summer here?
Hot. Very hot.
But with the recent cold spell, Iman learned how to get cool air in her apartment. She turned on the heater.
It blows cold air and not heat.
And that is exactly why the Tampa Housing Authority is taking heat this week, as HUD inspectors are going over the agency's financials after the 10 News investigators started asking questions.
We welcome credible organizations to come in and look at our records because you're not credible.
While Leroy Moore, the chief financial officer, doesn't think our reports are credible, HUD clearly does. In the past several months, we've uncovered THA over budget on its $7 million new office building. Hundreds of thousands spent on travel and training and paying the CEO more than allowed by Congress. The Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Sean Donovan, ordered the probe, and U.S. Senator Charles Grassley started asking questions.
Every dollar that goes to airfare, meals, lodging, conference fees is another dollar that can't be used to help house homeless Tampa Bay residents.
This internal THA email we obtained shows that even employees of the agency are upset.
The executives upstairs, they're all on these fancy trips with new iPhones and iPads, and we can't even get a damn raise.
Why take this money and do all these other things when you know that these places need to be fixed up, these places need, it's awful.
But even after our questions, the Tampa Housing Authority continues what some call frivolous spending, including one party last month, an event even employees are concerned about.
Really? With all the crap Deeson is putting us through, now they are having a party?
Head maintenance man told me to keep a bowl or something there to catch the water that drips down out of the refrigerator.
Now Reva Iman is pouring the water down the drain to keep her refrigerator from breaking down for the third time, the same way some say THA continues to pour money down the drain.
This has to stop. This has to stop.
Several people in public housing are telling us the same thing, but are afraid to speak out on camera. And the disparity between the THA headquarters and the rundown apartments is driven home when you consider the living room and kitchen of Reva Iman's place is just a little bit larger than CEO Jerome Ryan's office, and that doesn't count his private bathroom. And that disparity on how Tampa Housing Authority is spending its money and the way residents live is part of the reason HUD officials are in Tampa this week investigating THA. And you can count that the 10 News investigators will stay on top of it.
Federal investigators are still going over Tampa Housing Authority records as a result of our stories for what some are calling excessive spending. But this is not the first time the Tampa Housing Authority CEO, Jerome Ryans, has had questions over how his agency spends tax dollars. As 10 News investigator Mike Deeson has uncovered, it also happened when Ryans was CEO of the Memphis Housing Authority.
The audit goes back to 1997, to the time when Jerome Ryans was the CEO of the Memphis Housing Authority. The Office of Inspector General of the Department of Housing and Urban Development produced this scathing 56-page report on Ryan's agency. Among other things, the audit found Ryan's agency was not fulfilling its primary mission of providing decent, safe, and sanitary housing for low-income families. A significant factor, it said, in the deterioration was poor maintenance, poor planning, in short, poor management. And while the inspectors admitted the issues were old and not fully the fault of the current management, they also found the current management must bear some responsibility given their length of tenure. One published report has Ryans blasting the audit, saying as a whole it was a sloppy job by the HUD auditors. Meantime, the Tampa Housing Authority released this statement, where it doesn't deny or dispute the findings in Memphis, but it says it's unreasonable to compare it to the Tampa Housing Authority today. THA says it's been designated a high-performing agency. However, U.S. Senator Charles Grassley says that doesn't matter, and Tampa is guilty of spending taxpayer dollars for questionable expenses. 10 News investigators will stay on top of this, and there's much more to come.